Good morning, haters. It's me, Jamie Taylor, and my good friend Kendall Grooms. Welcome back.
Hey, Jamie.
Starting to get into the swing of things, unlike your golf swing.
It's going to happen today at some point.
It's going to happen. I told you to bring your golf clubs. But today, before we do that, we're going to talk about why I'm angry. I don't even have mascara on. That's how angry I am. I've cried it all off because representation is an issue, is it not?
It is.
Most of the cases you deal with where agents are upset with other agents probably has everything to do with representation and how they're getting paid, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what happened today when you walked in the room, and I'll just tell you kind of the short story so our haters can listen in, is I have a listing and I am clearly engaged with the seller in what's called an exclusive right to sell. Not a non-exclusive right to sell. And we have an agreement that I'm going to sell this property and that I'm going to co-broker it if another agent brings me or broker an offer with them, and we're going to split that fee. So I went to the property to show it yesterday. It's a large commercial property. On the beginning of the appointment, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get here at 3:00. I'm going to walk through this thing. I'm going to get this appointment over with. And then I know at 5, there's another showing, but that person has an agent, so I'm not going to come. So I go through and I do my showing, but when I arrive at the property, it's totally open, 100% open. Doors are open everywhere. And I'm like really concerned because I'm like, that's my buyer's right here with me. So I tell my buyer, hold on a second, someone's in here. I go in there, start looking around with my flashlight, and up pops this happy little guy who's like, hey, I got here early. I went ahead and accessed the lockbox. It's a combo. I went ahead and got the information. That's fine. From his agent, opened it, walked around. That's fine. But then he says, I want to make an offer. I'm going to try and do that tonight. So is there anything else I need to know? I'd like to leave an agent out of it if I can. And I'm like, first of all, that's rude. There's no reason to cut me out. And secondly, if you don't want to use an agent, that's fine. But the seller is engaged with me as an agent. So I'm going to stay involved. Plain as day, I'm going to stay involved.
That's the way it works.
Mm-hmm. Well, apparently not. So he said, okay, sure, I'll send you that's another nod for don't do the British accent. Literally sends a text message to my broker, which I'm actually the executive broker on this. So it's not like he needed any additional information. He texted him and asked for my seller's contact information so that he could present his offer directly to the seller so that he didn't have to deal with the listing agent. Now, keep in mind, we don't have a problem with this guy. He's a buyer. And I'm an agent at my listing.
He doesn't know you. He doesn't know the seller.
And he's asking for that information. So I guess for other agents in the room, that's ridiculous, in my opinion, because this is my client and my listing. And I think it's really rude and kind of starts the conversation out the wrong way to be like, hey, I know you're here and everything, but I think I'm going to go around you and go directly to your seller.
Talk to the guy that owns this place.
Yeah, and I don't need you to provide. Well, why do you think he hired me? He doesn't want you to call him to talk about it. He wants you to call me to talk about it. So I'm
making money somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Clearly. But here's the thing. So let's break down representation. So let's start off with, what does representation even entail? Those of you who are dabbling in commercial, moving from residential, also need to understand there are different rules at play when it comes down to listing that kind of property. There's not nearly as many guidelines. You know, with residential property, it has to be in the MLS in a certain amount of time. Commercial, you can walk around and talk about it all you want. So let's break it down. Talk to me about the exclusive right to sell and the rights, because I know you've been doing it all day anyways, the rights of the agent when they have an exclusive right to sell a property.
Sure. And you get this situation a lot because we talk about it on the show a lot. If it's all about, let's try to reduce the commission or cut the commission out or anything like that. And buyers, especially unsophisticated buyers or people that are not familiar with the real estate process, they believe that if an agent is involved in any capacity whatsoever, that they're going to have to pay a commission or part of a commission. And for realtors listening to this, they know that's not true. You're shaking your head no because you know that's not true.
Well, but also you have agency representation agreements that buyers can read.
But they still don't necessarily understand them. You hand it to them and they go, okay, I'm not going to read all that. They just think if I talk to a real estate agent, I'm going to have to pay something.
Does it bother you that you spend so much time writing things that people don't read? In the sense that contracts and, binding things that they're responsible to be reading,
nope.
Doesn't bother you?
Because if they sign it, the law says they read it.
Exactly. But that's what gets me is, so what you just said, the common misconception is that the buyer is going to have to pay a real estate commission if a realtor is involved, but that's not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
unless it's negotiated through part of the process, the seller pays the buyer's agent and the seller's agent, or the buyer's agent and the listing agent.
You guys have done that.
Now, I do think it's complicated sometimes because you have a listing agent everybody knows what the listing agent is. The listing agent is the person that has the property listed for sale under your exclusive listing agreement. That's right.
Yeah.
They're the people who have the thing where you go on the website and you look and it says, hey, look, this person has this listed. That's the person.
It's the upper hand.
But I've always thought it's wrong when they call the buyer's agent, the person representing the buyer, the seller's agent.
Selling agent.
I know, but you see it all the time. The selling agent should be the same as the listing agent.
Well,
I know that's how we designate it, but it doesn't make sense from a practical everyday person out there looking at it and say, well, I'm buying, I'm not selling. This is the selling agent. Why is there a listing agent and a selling agent?
I totally agree with you. And I think if we change that little bit of verbiage, the consumer would be definitely more informed. But what gets me about it, and here's the truth, it's because the selling agent, the buyer, that's because they're doing all the work. The listing agent essentially...
Well, the selling agent, the way I've had it explained is that the selling agent is selling their client on the property.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought they were actually selling the property, because I will tell you from a listing agent perspective, I don't do near as much as I do as a buyer agent, because I have the business.
It's still just confusing, though, the way they just call it the buyer's agent. So let's actually answer your question, because I haven't answered your question yet.
I'm so mad about this, and I know you know, but I normally don't start a show angry, and I'm pretty angry. Continue.
So you asked about the exclusive listing agreement.
Yeah, what are my rights? Tell me my rights.
Your rights are that if this property sells during your listing period, no matter your involvement, you're entitled to it. Unless there's some contractual exception. Like if someone says, I might sell this to my mom, we're going to put a provision here that if it sells to my mom, you're only entitled to a 1% commission instead of what might otherwise be a 5, 6, 10% commission on commercial property, something like that.
And there is a contingency in there already where if I sell the property with both parties and they come to me without an agent, then my commission will drop. And that's typically, I know other agents do that as well if there's a dual agency situation and or if they only represent one side. So we already have a co-brokerage agreement and a stipulation for if I bring the buyer.
And now you're jumping ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
So you got the listing agreement side of it. That's for you. You're listing the property. It gives you the rights to put properties in the MLS service so they can show up online, take photos of houses, determine what a listing price is on the market, advise the person that's trying to sell the home. And you have that exclusive right to do so. They can't go hire another agent. They can. It just creates all kinds of contractual obligations. Then that's where I get involved.
Yeah, that's when Kendall goes, well, Jamie was here first.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the listing agreement that a lot of people don't know, you're very well aware of it, is it has a fixed time. It's required to have a fixed time. Most listing agreements are 6 months to a year, somewhere in that period of time. Well, let's say you have a listing agreement for 6 months. People think, and sellers of property believe, that if my 6 months is going to run out on September the 3rd of 2021, that on September the 4th of 2021, I can go sell it to somebody else and I don't have to pay a commission anymore. And that's 100% not true. Let's say that your agent had actually discussed with somebody or marketed this property or had a phone call or an email with this person that ends up buying it from you. That is 100% that entitles them to a commission. There's a tail period that's usually 90 to 180 days on each contract.
Now it's a blank space that you have to fill in.
It's usually 90 to 180 days is what I see, that if the property sells in that 90 to 180 day period to any person or for any reason that the basis of that was in any way from the information that the real estate agent put into the transaction or gave to the public, you're entitled to a commission.
So essentially, I am entitled to the commission pretty much no matter what. And the only way that would happen differently is if I disengage with my seller by contractually terminating our agreement. And, well, actually, I guess if we terminate the agreement and it still sells by course, I'm still procuring cause and I'm still entitled to my commission.
Yes. Unless there's a specific agreement that you're not entitled to any commission, no matter what happens.
Well, and so what gets me
But there's also a cancellation fee too. I mean, each party, the seller has a right, the property owner has a right to cancel the contract, and you can always write in a cancellation fee. Some people write in, if you cancel it, you owe me the full commission. Some people say if you cancel it, you owe me $750 because that's what I've put into it for listing it on the MLS and signage and all that stuff.
Well, and signage is expensive on the commercial side. So this is one thing too that for other agents out there, especially, like, you really have to protect yourself. And Arkansas is a model state for forms like we talk about every week. But one big thing is there are blank spaces in all of those places that you just mentioned. The post period and the cancellation fee are up to the agent. And so I would say, just PSA in the middle of this conversation, is you need to put something on there that's going to take care of you, compensate you for the time that you're putting out there. So if you have a sign that's going to cost you $1,000 and a lockbox and an advertisement and some Facebook ads and some videography,
that on the front.
Put it on the front end and make sure that you understand if they cancel, you at least need to recoup your costs. And then additionally, if they cancel for some reason that's outside of your performance base, you can still collect your commission.
And I don't know what the paragraph number is. There's an other provisions paragraph.
30.
30. The form I used was several years old when I litigated on this issue, so I don't think it's 30, but it was
in
on
residential
that one. But right now
contracts,
it's 30. This one was an agricultural land sale. But they wrote
Why is that coming up in my space everywhere today?
I know, for some reason.
Back off.
They had a deal, and the agent decided they were going to play lawyer, which is illegal, period.
That's
the unauthorized practice of law. That they were going to add a bunch of provisions in their own language to the other provisions portion of it. And it was this whole deal of where the agent had written out this big agreement about who they would be entitled to a commission from. And they were then supposed to keep this huge list on the contract of all of these parties that they contacted who they would be entitled to a commission from. So it's an exclusive listing agreement, but they've drafted their own provision. And if the person who buys the property's name is not on this list by the agent, then they don't get a commission. So then the property goes under contract to sell, and there's a dispute about whether the agent contacted this person, and the very last name on the list at the bottom is the name of the person that bought the property.
Of
and
course.
so then there's a huge dispute of, well, when did you write that in there?
Yeah, when did you
and
write it?
It litigated for 2 years, and it was just a huge disaster over a $30,000 commission.
And this is the part that gets me about that is they did their job. The property sold.
Yes.
So who cares who it sold to? Anyways.
It's because they tried to play lawyer and revise this contract that was there when they're not allowed to do so.
Well, and to be fair, anybody that touches a real estate contract with a pen to make changes to it like that, to practice law unauthorized, is how'd they get a license? Because that honestly this is like the bill of sale thing. People doing the bill of sales on their own and not having somebody actually separate these things from contracts. I'll have in a residential contract to this day, I see them come across and they're like, XYZ conveys at $0. I'm like, get a bill of sale.
Well, and I unfortunately represented the real estate agent in that case trying to collect their commission. And we ultimately settled it because the property owner died and there's a probate that got filed. And we filed a claim in the probate and they said, forget it. We don't want to mess with it. What can we do to make this go away?
Yeah, we'll settle. And that's where it gets to the point. And that's kind of where I guess I'm so frustrated is because I feel like it's wrong to try to go around the person in the transaction to begin with, one. And I think as a seller, a lot of times you have to look at this like it's the cost of doing business. And it goes back to the fact that the barriers are very low and there are some things going on in the industry that allows them to believe that we are not as professional as we might present ourselves to be and or as necessary to the process. So I knew when I met this guy in person, he knew what he was talking about. He's bought other property. It's very clear he knows what he wants. So that's fine. But like, that doesn't make you able to go directly to my seller because technically he does not have a right to do that, right? I mean,
correct.
Even if he was a member of the public who ran out into the seller at a bar and he was like, hey, I saw that you own this property and I happen to be interested in it, the seller still has to pay me.
He should say, yeah. And well, he should say, call my agent about it on Monday.
Would. My seller would, which my seller, I already texted him and I was like, hey, just FYI, this guy's trying to go around me.
Crazy guy calls you.
Oh, I just said, there's a guy trying to go around me to bring you an offer. And he said, give him your email. I was like, I did. Yeah. So he just said, I'll tell him, I'll send it straight to you.
The second side of this is and I understand the reason why you said as the listing agent, you don't do as much work. The agent that most people are familiar with is the agent that's going to go show you houses or show you properties. The person that's going to show up. The person that's sitting out there on a Saturday letting 17 people in to see some house that's the separate agreement. There's a mirror agreement for, I'm going to call it a buyer's agent because I hate the term. But the buyer's agent,
it actually says
an exclusive buyer's agency agreement that says, I'm going to help you shop for a house. And that's what it says at the top, but they call them a seller's agent or selling agent.
I was literally about to be like, okay, you can get mad about this because it literally says exclusive buyer's agency agreement. And then it's like selling agent. Like, who's this guy? He's new to the
you're
party.
like, where's the quotes that says here and after the buyer's agent? It's not there. It's just.
So all the contracts are null and void.
No.
I'm just kidding. But seriously, you look at that and you talk about the representation. So let's talk about co-brokerage. Yeah. The way that it actually works is you have a listing. And for the record, technically, we don't have a list price because that would be a standard rate of commission because that would be price fixing. So we're not going to talk about 6%. The undisclosed percentage listed in the listing agreement can be co-brokered. The listing agent gets to keep it. And then the actual brokerage pays the other brokerage when the deal closes. So if you didn't know that, my question is, what if the buyer on this side doesn't have an agency representation agreement and it gets brought to light? Can you then recoup the remaining commission? And if not, if you can't get all of the commission, is it like what happens to the 2% if there's not a buyer agency agreement?
I think that depends. I mean, if you executed a document in writing saying that you were reducing
6%.
your commission because of this buyer, whatever it is, then you're stuck with it.
I'm talking about
if you're
this.
entitled to 6% and you learn at closing that a buyer that doesn't have an agent, that's what you're talking about?
Yeah,
you could recoup it.
So what if the guy comes in and he goes ahead and executes on it and he makes an offer and we get under contract and there's no buyer agency agreement, but I also didn't bring the buyer, so my contingency wouldn't count. It would just remain how I had it listed to begin with, right? So I didn't cut myself off from that option.
Nope.
I'm so smart. Thank you for being my friend.
And then you got the dual agency side of it, which is interesting. And I think the Arkansas Real Estate Commission hates dual agency like a lot of courts do.
So do agents.
But dual agency, there's not a dual agency agreement, is there? It's just I thought it was the listing agreement, and the listing agreement just says that you're entitled to be a dual agent, and then you would be able to sign a buyer's agency agreement.
There's
with
actually
a buyer.
a dual agency representation form.
Okay.
But that form only is a disclosure and allows you to say dual agency means this.
But at that point, the buyer and the seller would have had to come to you at the same time, and that doesn't. Well, it happens, but
it does. But the main thing with dual agency that we find, at least on the agent side, the reason agents don't like it is because it looks like you do not have the best interest of both parties in mind. Because truthfully, how do you have the best interest of a buyer and a seller?
And the real estate commission regulations say that.
Let's be really careful though, because I've done a lot of dual agencies.
Well, the real estate commission regulations say that you still have the same loyalty. No, actually, I'm wrong on that. It says you do not have loyalty to either party in that instance, but you cannot disclose confidential information to one party, such as if one party makes an offer of $200,000 or wants to, and you know that the seller would take $180,000, you can't tell the buyer, let's nudge it down $20,000. You can't.
Which no agent would do anyways, because the commission goes up.
You can't disclose financials. The same goes the other way. The seller could be saying, what should I sell it to this buyer for? And you say, well, they've got a little bit of wiggle room,
And this is something that's the thing. That's why agents don't like it. Now, I'll say that when I've been in dual agency situations, how it's usually gone is two things. One, dual agency also means we work at the same brokerage. So you could be two separate agents working on a transaction, but you have to do a dual agency disclosure because your agency...
That is dangerous.
Yeah, because if things get crazy and it's Bluebird on one side and Bluebird on the other, then really
it requires full disclosure of all material facts except for things that are confidential, like knowledge about what an acceptable offer would be or an acceptable buying price would be, or like disclosing financials of someone. Like if you're privy to their loan documents saying, yeah, this person makes $1 million a year, so they'll sell this for a lot less money since they make so much money. Mm-hmm. That's something that you can't discuss. But everything else, I mean, if you find out in confidence from one party that there's been a huge mold problem in the house, you have to disclose that there's been a huge mold problem in the house. You can't withhold it from the other party.
I know, but what's interesting about what you just said is, first of all, most people that make millions of dollars are actually quite frugal. And secondly, when it comes down to talking about these agreements, dual agency is not only terrifying because of the agency piece, but then it's what we just talked about before. There is a line in there that says your fiduciary responsibility still exists to both parties. So even though you can't have a loyalty, you have a fiduciary responsibility. So if I'm financially guiding you through this process and I represent the guy who wants to make the most money possible and the guy who wants to get it as cheap as possible, that's not going to get on the same page. There's no way. And so I think when people think of dual agency, that's what they have to remember, is that that's because you're not supposed to be representing the best interests of both people who have opposite interests. Now, bringing that back down to, does it happen?
That's why you have a specific agreement where everybody waives conflicts and liability and everything else.
And you have the separate agreements of, okay, here's a dual agency disclosure. Jamie's my listing agent. I have an exclusive right to sell. Aaron is my buyer's agent. I have an exclusive buyer's agency selling agent agreement.
And the listing agent likes it because they get the whole commission.
Yeah.
But it's a bad idea.
It is a bad idea. But the other part of it is, and I've done it.
That's why we hate real estate.
Yeah, that is.
Right there is because the agent gets the best side of the deal.
And the consumer
but it's not what the best thing is for the home buyer or the seller.
I'm sorry to interrupt this riveting conversation, but it's time for a word from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by American Abstract and Title Company. Not only does this place handle most of the real estate transactions that go down in Pulaski County, but they do it with professionalism, and no one has more energy than their fearless leader, Andrew Atkins. If you have any concerns whatsoever about your title work, bring your file over to American Abstract Title and know it's going to close on time and in style. I have used American Abstract Title for more than one transaction in my real estate career, and they are not one of the reasons why I host a show called I Hate Real Estate. Remember, at the end of the day, we don't really hate it. We're actually great at it. So my friend Andrew Atkins and American Abstract Title is the place for you to close your business. This episode is brought to you by Campbell & Grooms Law Firm. This small law firm has the tenacity to go after the big guy when your HGTV situation doesn't turn out so great. Remember, we started this show for a reason, and these guys know what to do when things turn upside down. Donald Campbell and Kendall Grooms are the Arkansas Trial Lawyers Association Trial Lawyers of the Year for 2019-20, and I'm pretty sure 21's in the bag. And at the end of the day, that's the thing that they have to be aware of. As a home buyer or seller, what you have to be aware of is look at the brokers that you're choosing to list your property with and determine what their best interest is. Because what I find, and that's kind of where I'm at with this guy, is my interest in this is to get the best possible deal for my seller. So do I want somebody who is willing to go literally and then lie about it? The guy sends an offer, get this, from an agent. He has an agent. After all this, after all the, I want to cut an agent out.
I want to cut agent out.
His agent just sent the offer while we are sitting here talking. So he wanted to cut the agent out, just not his. So that's the kind of stuff right there that as a consumer, if you tell me I'm going to save.
That means he wants to get it cheaper so that his seller doesn't have to pay a commission.
But here's the thing. That's my seller, and my seller and I already made that agreement. Consumers and agents alike, listen to this. We already executed the agreement. So there's nothing you're going to do in his mind to take that money down unless you put that on the table. So that is why I think in the I hate real estate attitude that I have today is that he literally tried to go around me to make this deal cheaper for himself as an investor, which screws my seller out of more money, creates a bunch of animosity between me and for sure his agent and the other people in the situation. And third, we're probably not going to end up getting this thing to closing because it sounds like he's irrational and unreasonable. Although I'm going to
sounds like the start. It sounds like the start of someone coming to me and saying, "I've got a tort. I've got an intentional interference with my contractual expectancy."
You know
what? You ever heard of that before?
That actually, say it again. Squiggly line. What?
Intentional interference with a contractual expectancy.
I really like that.
It means you have the expectancy of receiving some benefit under a contract, and someone else interferes with it, knowing that what they do interferes with your rights under the contract. It's a tort. It's just like fraud.
I have a tort. And I'm going to need to sit here and discuss that with you off air so that you can, I'm just kidding. What we'll do is get this thing to closing is what we'll do. Because I'm going to do what I think you should do as a professional situation. Consummate professional. I already texted the seller. I said, hey, this guy's got an offer coming your way. He's going to try to go around me. So I'm going to send it to you. I am the procuring cause. Do you have any questions? Let me know. And he said, my question is, why is he sending it to me? Send it to you. So as a consumer, you need to be aware when you sign a listing agreement, you are agreeing to pay what you type in that box. So either the listing full percentage goes to your listing agent or they designate through that item, co-brokerage, I'm going to pay a buyer's agent, selling agent, XYZ. If you don't pay attention to that page and you're questioning why at the end of your transaction, your listing agent who you fired first is collecting the commission and not your second listing agent, there's a good piece of information right there to review is the exclusive right to sell. So that being said, we have how many representation agreements? Exclusive right to sell, non-exclusive, buyer's representation agreement, non-exclusive buyer's representation agreement, permission to show. What else? I think that's it.
The dual agency agreement is a part of one of those. Yeah. Technically, I don't know. Is there a separate dual agency?
I don't know. There is. I'm going to pull it up real quick just to verify. And while we're doing that, can we talk a little bit about permission to show? Because I feel like this is an underutilized form, and I feel like what happens a lot is people get in these FSBO situations. I have another one right now where someone's working with an agent and makes a phone call to me and said, hey.
It's kind of another version of a non-exclusive listing agreement in a way, is it not?
Kind of feels that way, but because it's
you probably have more experience with that than I do. I actually just drafted a waiver not long ago for a real estate company because they had the seller and all of the listing agents were not able to attend. It's an agricultural property.
Stop it with these.
And it's dangerous. You go up to an agricultural property that's got a bunch of water on it. You can get who knows what out there. They're not familiar with the property, snakes, alligators, everything else around, old structures that they may or may not should go into. And so these people are like, yeah, we want to go see it with no agents, no parties there. We want to be, since you guys can't go, it's urgent. And they made me draft a waiver for them to sign that says you're not holding us responsible if someone gets hurt going around looking at this property.
That is crazy. I don't understand how come people want no agents there. Why would they not?
It wasn't that they didn't want any agents there. They were willing to go see it without agents and needed to from a time perspective, and nobody was available. They didn't they made the request to go anyways, but they didn't make a request, hey, we want to see this property, but we don't want any agents or the property owners to show up. It wasn't like that.
Okay. Well, this is interesting too, because what I'm looking at on here, I'm realizing that there is also this other agreement we didn't talk about, which is not the permission to show, but the non-representation disclosure. Wow. So this disclosure right here, consideration, licensee as a seller. In the event that non-representation option in this real estate contract was selected, they acknowledge that no agency relationship exists between either the buyer or seller to any brokerage firm shown on this form.
I see that from time to time. You probably have seen that in commercial leases before. If you've looked at where at the end there'll be a no broker certification,
right?
That you say there's no broker. No broker is going to come in and claim money out of this transaction from me for the deal, and if they do, then you would indemnify and pay that for them because you didn't disclose it on the front end.
Okay.
I bet it reads the same way as that.
It does, but it's interesting because my brain went the other way. Like, why would they do that? And look at all these there's all these 2021 forms, so I got distracted. My apologies. But the agency representation.
You still love real estate, don't you?
I do. It's interesting too because so today I'm doing expert testimony work for you, as you know, and I'm out doing my research. And what's interesting to me about this, and that's kind of what's really truthfully growing this platform, is I have realized through this process with you that I do hate real estate some days. There's days like today that, it's bullcrap. I'm just going to say it. Like, I'm working really hard. I'm doing a good job. I'm telling the truth. My client and I have a good relationship. You're in the industry. For you to just call and treat another agent like that and just walk all over the professionalism that we try to have in the industry, that is why I want to start the show, because I think people should listen to it and hear the intelligence and the content that we have to talk about. Because this is a professional industry. This is like a doctor or a lawyer or a CPA. I'm handling hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm dealing with your assets. Yeah. In fact, I've sold your house and I want you to feel confident about my abilities. So this kind of stuff frustrates me because the lack of professionalism is what keeps our industry down here with used car salesmen instead of up here with doctors. That's just the way I'm going to put it.
And that applies, and what we're doing with the show applies to the legal field as well. It's a professional field just like that. And you've got lawyers who can go into a courtroom and you get heated arguments, major issues, lots of dollars. Your clients are depending on you to be win. Correct in your arguments and your analysis. And so you may get after it with somebody in a courtroom and then go have lunch with them afterwards. Yeah, and that's what you want. And everybody has the understanding it's just professional. But every once in a while, you get a lawyer who won't do that. You get a lawyer who takes everything that you say on behalf of your client like you're saying it at them, that it's intentional, that you're throwing them under the bus for some reason. And it's not true. We don't do that. You may get personally invested in a case, but you don't get personally invested against another lawyer. They're not the bad guy.
Well, technically you're good at that, and I've seen you turn it on and turn it off. Not all attorneys are, but it's interesting that you said that because you think of a lawyer and attorney, obviously you're thinking, oh, that's a high up their field. Those guys are totally respectable. I have sat in a room with an attorney who literally took the option to mediate a case that she was involved in. Like, that's not professional. You can't mediate a case that you filed a lawsuit on. Like, that doesn't, but they do it, just like real estate agents represent both parties without disclosure. It happens. But the idea of this show.
But you get people that call law firms all the time, and I don't know why the word gets used, but you get somebody and they'll call and say, we need a bulldog, we need a lawyer. That's not how it works.
You need somebody who's
prepared. You can have somebody who gets prepared, who handles your case, who understands your case, and who knows how to handle it. They don't have to be crazy.
No.
They don't have to scream and yell at people. They don't have to go in the courtroom and go all nuts on stuff. Yeah, or bite people.
The point is... Sorry,
no, I don't like that.
I know, but at the end of the day, it's kind of a threat. The way I look at it is, and that's what I appreciate about being able to do the show with you, is that I have gotten so many people that have come up to me since we started the show and been like, thank you. Like, I just wish somebody would say it. And so I'm even becoming, like I said at the beginning of the show, more and more comfortable talking about it the way we talk about it when the cameras are not on, because that is what's going to change this industry, is people actually pointing out we can do this in a copacetic way. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. So turning your back on people in your industry or pointing fingers at what they did wrong isn't going to help you. Coming on here and airing your dirty laundry is fine because we'll redact the names. But at the end of the day,
it's fun. And it makes you feel better.
It does. I feel better already.
Well, we don't change from how we are before we're on the air from when we go on the air. We're talking about the same exact issues, just maybe without some language.
Well, and I'm far less focused off air. Like, once I get on the air, I'm like, wait, come back to the subject.
Oh yeah, she'll be like, hang on, I got to text somebody, and she's sitting there on her phone for a while. But it's the same thing. We feel the same way, regardless of what we're doing. This is not for show. This is not for fun. It is for fun, but it is fun to do it, and like you said, air out some of the laundry that's here. But it's not something that we're doing just for the show. It's something that these are real things that occur.
Well, and so this is a good conversation that we had on the way to do that appraisal today. Is I was talking with my buddy who's helping me do expert testimony. And one of the reasons why I reach out to other appraisers is because typically I will feel or begin to feel a little bit biased about things. And if I start to feel that, and I've come to you before and been like, I'm going to need to pull in XYZ, because even that gut feeling of like, I know that they did something wrong, they didn't disclose it, whatever the issue might be, if I feel like I cannot be impartial or objective, I'm going to go find somebody who can. Because at the end of the day, like we talked about, this is about protecting and maintaining the public's trust as consumers in professionals that have to do with real estate, whether that's their attorney or their agent. You've got something to say because you're making that smiley face.
No, it's just...
But we're saving it. We had the discussion and he said to me,
I mean, you are biased on this one.
I'm biased on this one, but that's why I brought somebody else in. And I'm only biased because you put yourself in a situation where, and I say this to all of you who represent clients. You're an attorney and you get emotionally invested in them. But even if I wasn't, these people were damaged by a decision that was made in malice. It was made selfishly. I'm not going to say anything because it will affect me. And it affected their life for the rest of their lives. So, I mean, I hate real estate. The reason that title's so easy is because real estate will ruin your life as quickly as it will make it happen. So, I am.
Yeah, and we had a case we were going to talk about today. We've ended up spending longer on this than we intended to because it's an issue that's out there. But it's the same thing. I mean, it's just going to continue. We've got 2 or 3 cases where we want to do a look at it in the future, and it's going to just show that people's lives get ruined by this.
They do. And that's, I think, what I really want to, we talked about this today in the car, and that's why our guest coming up on one of our future episodes, we'll talk about it when we announce her, like on that day. But when we're talking to her, one of the things that her and I have had conversations about is the barrier thing that you and I have talked about as well. If there was a way to put training in place for real estate agents, and they're all going to hate me. I hope we don't lose our listener base. But put the kind of training in place that's on the job, where you don't already have a license executing through transactions and you're already involved in something that could potentially ruin your life or theirs. That broker should be over you for a period of time, supervisory, similar to the way they do it in the appraisal field. Because in my opinion, that's where we're at right now. And this is where we've got to go, so that the professionalism also rises up, but that there's a way for people to make money at this career and build a life around it.
Yep. One of the things that's interesting, one of the things you have is you guys have CE hours that you have to get.
Yeah.
This continuing ed hours. And you probably there's probably a thing like there is in the law where you get credit for the CE hour, where if you're the speaker, you get like 3 hours credit for every hour of speaking or whatever it ought to be. Nobody likes these seminars. It doesn't matter if you're speaking at them. It can be great. Nobody likes going to them. It's the same thing with CLE and the law. You enjoy some of the topics, but they'll put together like a full day and half of it won't apply to anything that you do.
You're just like, where's the snack pack?
Exactly. Well, when are we getting out of here? Mm-hmm. And you hate to say that because you want to listen, and we do. We listen. We try to understand just in case something comes up in everyday life where you're trying to answer questions. But they ought to be able to do a deal where when you have someone new that comes up, whether it be a lawyer or a real estate agent that's either just gotten licensed or is attempting to be licensed, you ought to give somebody that's a broker or somebody that's been an agent for 10 years the opportunity to say, hey, real estate commission, when you issue this person this license, assign them to me. I can sign up for a program, assign them to me. They can shadow me for 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, whatever it needs to be. Watch how we handle transactions, answer questions that we do, and you get your CE credit for the year. But there would be people that would sign up for that, and it would make the industry so much better.
I would
make it so much better.
I would do it right now. If you called me right now and said, that's one of my things with real estate. If you truthfully go back, I started looking at this the other day with Joey, and we went back to that very first brokerage I ever worked at when I got that license and moved over to do real estate from appraisal. I had the time of my freaking life teaching other people how to do real estate. Watching their eyes light up when you show them how to actually pull a comparable that makes sense to the bank and not just the buyer. If you pull up something that shows them you can add more value to your seller, it lights up their world, and they want to be good at their job like you're talking about. But the better you get at your job, it's through falling on your face in real estate. And it's just like appraisal. You cannot come out here and learn this without experience. You have to fail to make it. So in order to fail in real estate, you have to ruin someone's life or your own. So that's why it's important to go through that process. So I'm just really grateful because I thought about that today while we were driving through. I had 2 duly licensed appraiser realtors in the car discussing the experience that we've had, not just doing expert testimony, but executing transactions, dealing with some of the things we deal with from the estate. Like we'll get an estate referral and the person's going crazy and they can't remember what they're supposed to be doing with their house. So we got to bring in probate and we got to get a family member. And there's so many things that come along with the complexity of it. That's why it's so important to do it well. So, right. I mean, I guess I'll leave the law up to you, but that's the way I would rule on it.
You can rule. You can rule.
Today? Because I'm so mad. See how mad?
You broke it.
All right. Well, you know what I'm going to say?
What?
I'm going to say that this deal's probably not going across the table. But I'm going to say that I'm ruling in favor today of exclusive representation of the client via an executed ARA form.
Without interference.
Without interference. No tort for you.
No tort.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Tort free. Actually, that's nice. Made me want to.
We'll make you one that's much softer.
Okay, I think that was kind of loud. Audio, we'll edit that. All right, you guys, thank you for tuning in for another episode of I Hate Real Estate. And remember, the gavel has spoken. For your protection, get a home inspection. Kendall Grooms, Jamie Taylor. Until the next time, we're out.
Bye.
Bye.